Okay, so today we're going to be working on twisting and kind of ungluing the thoracic spine a little bit. The thoracic, we tend to want to twist more from the lumbar and from the cervical spine, and kind of for good reason. The ribs are all attached at the thoracic spine, and the ribs are, protective of lots of important stuff. So this part of our body can sometimes get a little too stable, right? And then when this is a little sticky, then things up and down the chain can kind of pay the price for a lack of mobility through the thoracic spine. So we're going to be working on that. And then we're also going to work a lot of hip opening. And then we're going to toy around with some variations of grasshopper pose. So grasshopper is a pretty advanced arm balance, but you don't have to be an advanced arm balancer to enjoy this class. Of course, if you do have grasshopper in your practice, then this practice will really open up and strengthen that shape, and you will have an opportunity to practice it when we get into that section of class. You will need 2 blocks and a strap, and maybe 2 straps. You might. There's going to be a fun little backbend variation at the end. And I'd like you to have something that you can slide on. So if you're on carpet, paper plates or magazines are good. And if you're on a hardwood floor, a blanket, a small towel, just something enough for a hand or a foot to be on. It doesn't have to be big. Okay, and we're going to get started in supported fish pose. Come to all fours. Have your blocks nearby. Fold your mat back, and this has the added benefit of padding up your knees a little extra. Grab your slidey thing. I'm going to use a blanket. Okay, and put it underneath your right hand. Okay, walk your left hand a little bit more forward and just thread your right arm behind your left. You can allow the left elbow to bend and just really reach out. Feel that beautiful stretch behind the right shoulder, and then come back. And do that a few times, really reaching. And feel where do you feel the twist? Where do you feel it coming from? Okay. Alrighty, and then you're going to set your right knee on a block and your left hand on a block, okay? So now this is going to deepen the twist because your pelvis is twisted to the right, you see? Okay, and then repeat that. So slide your slider out, and notice with your pelvis pre-twisted to the right, it's a little deeper, and maybe you even feel the twist in a slightly different place. And go a few times, and then we'll hold. Okay. So hold, when you find, when you decide that you want to hold, really reach, like push the slidey thing out to the left. And notice if your hips have wagged to the left. Can you pull your left hip back, put more weight into the right knee on the block? And breathe. Looking underneath your left arm. And then come back through center, and we'll switch sides. So bring your other block to its tallest setting, okay? And once again, step your right foot onto the block. Bring your hands to the second block. Okay, so feet are about hip distance. So this is Ardha Uttanasana, but with one foot on the block, okay? Now, you're going to try to keep both hands on the supporting block. Keep your shoulders facing the floor. Can you start to straighten through the right leg? Twisting to the right. Okay, and then rebend that knee. So it may or may not come all the way straight. Especially if you think of it as a hip thing, you'll kind of feel stuck. If you think of it as a twist with your spine, it suddenly becomes way more approachable. So do it a few times, exploring. So similar action to those step ups. Okay, and then switch feet. So left foot to the block. And again, Keep your shoulders square to the floor, push down into the block under your hands, and just see if you can straighten through that left leg. And it's really strange, like the first rep, you're like, oh, this is a hip thing, I can't possibly. But if you start to think of it as a spinal twist, suddenly it becomes possible. It's crazy. Crazy how the brain takes over and wants to say, no, I can't do that, it's new, it's different, it's weird, I don't want to. But the more we do stuff like that, the more plasticity our brain has. The more it can learn new tasks, new ways of doing things. So standing behind your blocks, hands on blocks if you need them. Okay, and then you're gonna step your left leg back first this time. Okay, now bring your right hand block to inside of your right ankle. Plant your left foot, line your feet up as if you were gonna be in warrior two. So heel to arch-ish, okay? So you may or may not need the block, but it's to the inside of your right knee. Push your outer shoulder or your elbow or your arm into the inner right knee and open up for Parsva Konasana. So left arm to the ceiling and try to gaze at your left hand. Sink your hips low. So notice if in an effort to reach your hand to the floor, you lifted your hips. I'd rather have your hips low and your hand on a block. Okay. Now bring your left arm, left hand behind your head. Now this looks familiar. You're gonna turn your chest towards the floor. Can you tap your left elbow to the floor or maybe to the block or anywhere in that real estate, and then open back up, pushing your arm into your knee as you open and squeezing everything in as you close. Work with the breath. Good, and then open up. Stay in Parsva Konasana. Sink your hips. Push your arm into your right knee and pull your right knee away from your arm. Breathe. Gaze at your left thumb if you can. Okay, and then circle your left arm overhead and down towards the floor. Turn your shoulders to the floor. Try to stay with your right knee bent, okay? Now you have options here. Both hands are to the inside of your right foot. You can be up on blocks, okay? And just kind of trying to work on this flexibility here. If you're a little more bendy, hands on the floor, maybe forearms on the floor. Wherever you are, move a little bit. So rock back and forth a little bit. Allow your hips a chance to, kind of get on board with this. And wherever you are, push your left heel back. Strengthen and lengthen through that left leg. And breathe into the right hip. Can you, even no matter how low you are or high you are, can you drive the right heel into the floor and feel that whole right hip turn on? Okay, good. And then set your left knee down and heel toe your right foot to behind your left wrist, okay? So here, again, your hands can be up on blocks here or on the floor, okay? So once your shin is parallel to the short edge of your mat, come back up onto the ball of the left foot. Okay, try to keep your shoulders square to the floor. See if you can dip your right knee towards your right wrist. And as you do that, try not to open your hips to the left. So as you sink your right knee towards your right wrist, can you also think about corkscrewing your left hip towards the mat? And go up and down a few times. Driving into the outer edge of the right foot, being active through that right hip. This is an active pigeon pose. Okay, and then set your left knee down, and probably the front shin will come away from parallel to the mat. But I want you to see if you can find strength through the legs. Like, can you pour enough weight into the legs so that you could take your hands off your blocks or the floor? Yeah. So driving the top of the left foot into the mat. Good. If it's too much, you can also bend this back knee and just work in more of a 90-90 position, okay? But if you can own this position, even if your right hip's off the floor, if you can own this, you're fine, okay? You can also take a block and put it underneath your right hip if you need more support or if like the knee doesn't like this for whatever reason. Okay, now turn to your left and you're gonna try and touch your right elbow to your right foot. You can have your left fingertips on the floor, okay? You might get nowhere near the foot. You might be way over here, and that's fine, okay? But you're gonna try to tap that right elbow to the right sole of the foot 5 times. You can also do it with no hands on the floor. Try to do for 5. Feel your right hip being strong here. So feel like your body being supported by that right leg, okay? And then end in the twist, whether your elbow's on the floor and your foot's way back here, okay? Or whether the left knee is bent, that's fine too. But try to get your elbow somewhere near the foot, hands to prayer, and try to twist open. Drive the top of the left foot into the floor if your back leg is extended, and breathe. As you try to twist open, can you kick the right heel into the arm if you're touching, if those 2 points are touching? Good, and then come back up through center. So we're gonna use the sliders. So you can move your mat out of the way. Okay, so grab your slidey thing and your blocks. And this is gonna be playtime. So I want you to try and approach this with a sense of play, right? I'm gonna give lots of options. And so you're gonna stick with the option that feels doable and useful for you, okay? So the easiest option will be step your right foot outside your blocks. You can have your hands on high blocks. You can even use a chair, okay? You're gonna put your left foot on the slidey thing and then bend through the right knee. And the deeper you bend that knee, the more challenging it's going to be, okay? But try to keep your hips low and slide your left foot. Try to keep your left leg straight as you slide. Slide it over to the right and try to slide it as far forward as you can. You should feel a big squeeze on the inner thighs, okay? And then you can just work here, sliding back and forth like that, okay? Now, if that feels really challenging, like you're having a hard time getting your leg over there, you can put your right foot on a block and then put both hands on the other block, okay? And that just lifts this whole situation a little bit higher. So this just kind of gives more real estate for that leg to get through and under, okay? Now, if that feels totally easy, then your next option is lower the blocks, lower the blocks, lower the blocks. Maybe your hands are on the floor, okay? And you're really bent through that right knee, and you're bringing the left leg through and over. Maybe you can drive into the right foot and hover the left foot off the blanket or the slider, okay? So that's your other option. It's a second option, okay? Trying those little hovers and slides. Third option is bend the elbows. Really get inside that right knee. Slide, okay? Maybe you try lifting the foot off the slider or the blankets here, trying to keep the elbows bent, trying to keep the chest really low. And notice how when the leg goes over there, you feel the twist in the spine. The right shoulder will want to lift. The work is to try and sink the right shoulder towards the floor and keep the hips low even as you slide the leg over there, okay? Now, if that's still feeling pretty easy, so you can stick with that, or you put a block underneath, maybe 2 blocks underneath the standing foot and your hands on the floor, okay? So, left foot on the sliders, hands on the floor, stand through the right foot, bend the elbows. Notice how with the elbows bent, that's about, if you're using 2 blocks, that's almost all the way to grasshopper, okay? So, bending the elbows, try to square your shoulders to the floor, so sinking the right shoulder. Feel that spinal twist. Slide the left leg across to the right. Maybe you drive down into that right foot and hover the leg. Bend the elbows, square the shoulders. Here you go, grasshopper, without having to contend with a slippery tricep, right? And you can either just work the pose, you can work the slides, okay? So you can do all of that, or if you're up for it, so if that is doable, like maybe you surprised yourself, maybe you try the full version of the pose, okay? Full version. So keep working unless you found unless you want to move on. If you're super sweaty, a towel can be handy, and then you would drape it over your foot, come into that figure 4 chair, and try to work your right tricep to the sole of the right foot. Work the twist for a few breaths, and then you can move into the pose. I'm actually not that sweaty, so the towel is more slippery than helpful. So you come into it. If the floor seems really far away, sometimes putting hands on blocks can be useful. So you sink into the hips, you twist, bring your elbow to the sole of the foot. Try to work the tricep as far down, the foot as high up to the armpit as you can. Maybe take a couple breaths in the twist. And then push your foot into your tricep and your tricep into your foot. Lock those two together. And then place your hands on the floor or on blocks. Now, before you even try to lift the left leg, bend deeply through the elbow and find yourself standing on your right elbow or your right tricep, okay? Once you've found that standing action, then you can hover the left leg. Then you can extend it. And you can breathe here. You're trying to square your shoulders to the floor. And then you can come out. All right, so you can give that a try. Maybe you've been sliding, resting, watching, whatever you need. And then we'll try the second side.